This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. In the riveting book, The Alchemist, written by Paul Coelho and published in 1988, the central character, a boy named Santiago, has a dream about a buried treasure and goes off on what becomes a profound journey to find it. During this psychologically embedded search, he meets an alchemist, a wise man who encourages the boy to think in terms of turning basic elements into gold. For the alchemist, this transition relates to mind, body, and spirit. This is a book about following one's dream to find their purpose in life. The story is one which always challenges me to think beyond the obvious of what we see each day. In the world of theater, film, dance, and opera, we have alchemists who spend their lives crafting the simple into the sublime, the innocent into something sinister, or capturing historical renderings on the canvas of a face. I am speaking about the alchemy of the makeup artist. The craft is a paradox. There is a whiff of mystery built through skill and discipline of the art form. And my guest today would tell you it's actually all about storytelling. Well, the craftswoman I speak of is Academy Award winning makeup artist Lois Burwell. She is responsible for the work and creations in makeup for films such as Braveheart, Almost Famous, The Last Samurai, Warhorse, Saving Private Ryan, The Princess Bride, Legend, and the incredible Spielberg telling of Lincoln. This is just a short list of her work, ladies and gentlemen. She has had the distinguished role of working with Steven Spielberg on at least 6 films. She has served on the judges panel of Sci-Fi's original series, Face Off. And in 2017, she was voted the first vice president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And personally, she has the honor of being the wife of legendary cinematographer John Toll. For them both, the film industry has been an alchemical journey, and I hope they will never stop looking to create gold. Well, Lois Burwell, welcome to Center Stage. It is such an honor to have you as my guest.
Oh my goodness, that was such a fantastic introduction. I forgot that we were going to be talking. I'm thinking, who's that interesting person that I'm about to meet?
Well, I was getting to you, my dear. There is no question about it. And I remember when I first met you just recently at the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival. The minute I sat down by you and realized who you were, I realized just how special you were by your own look, which is so distinctive. And it's interesting, you do makeup, but yet you wear very little.
Well, the thing is, I find other people's faces much more interesting than my own. That's the bottom line. And, it's sort of boring to look at the same face every day. I quite like seeing other people's faces and seeing what I can do with those. So that's why, really. Yeah. But I suppose what I then do is I'm very fond of clothes. So, and probably if I was a costume designer, I'd just wear jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Well, do you think I'm right in my introduction? Are you an alchemist?
I don't know. I'd love to be. I think that that's a wonderful description. I can definitely see some of my colleagues being alchemists, and I know that my husband, John Toll, is most definitely. Um, Hard to see about yourself. I mean, I think that commenting or thinking what you possibly are is rather like seeing your eyebrows. They're the closest thing to your eyes, but you need a mirror to be able to see them. So I'm not really certain. But yes, I mean, the art of makeup is definitely uh, alchemy. Yes.
There is no doubt about that. That you actually bring up a good point about looking at yourself, and you're being very humble right now, I feel, because definitely you do spin creations and out of very simple beginnings. And I think your art form is so fascinating because of it.
Yes. It it is. When you're in the zone of creating seeing a face and then seeing the possibility of where that face can go or what can be brought out from it or added to it. It's it's a very strange thing. I mean, I personally can't do that thing that I admire in other people, which is that they can talk through it and do small talk or whatever it is. And if I do a demonstration makeup, I forget to speak. I can't say, and now here what we're doing is while I'm doing it. I just go quiet and it sort of happens. And I don't mean that in a pretentious way, but it somehow just happens. But it's not necessarily a plan. You just know. And I think the closest to way to describe it is when it really connects and happens is in that um, probably Eskimo art form, which is that what you're doing is you're just removing in order for the sculpture or the shape to already exist. It already exists and you discover it. It's that kind of feeling.
Very interesting. That's definitely in the zone. I love that. I love that. I really want to talk to you about your background a bit.
Yeah,
We know you are English and you come, I think you were born in Hampstead in North London.
I was. Oh, well done. Yes, I was born in the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson Hospital in Hampstead Heath. Yeah. I
Were
don't think it exists anymore, actually.
were your family involved in the movie business at all?
Oh, good God, no. My mother, both my parents were older when they had me. They were in their mid-40s, and I was their first and only child. Um, Although they got married in 1938, so they'd been married a considerable amount of time. And my father was an electrician, but he was an electrician, a household electrician. And my mother started off as a seamstress working. She left school when she was 12 and went to work for a dressmaker that made court dresses for Debs that were coming out. Um, and then she retrained as a telephonist. And in fact, during the war, she had a very interesting job because she was working at Grosvenor House as a telephonist there, which is a rather posh hotel for those who don't know it
Quite.
in London. And then when the Americans joined the war, she went to work as a telephonist in the basement of Selfridges, which was the American Army's HQ in London.
Very
So,
interesting.
yeah,
I
so that was
didn't know
interesting.
that about Selfridges. I actually didn't
Yeah.
know that. One of my favorite stores when I lived there, by the way, Lois.
Oh, there you are. And
Oh,
American owned. Selfridge, Mr. Selfridge was American.
totally, 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 totally.
And yeah, it's a great store actually. The most wonderful lifts. They have they've got those Art Nouveau lifts, which are just splendid. I hope they still have them. But my father, he 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 had a very difficult war. Let me put it that way. So
Okay.
he he was subject to sometimes great depression, and was really frightened of any kind of lightning and thunder. Any kind of thunderstorm. Um, so I always felt, I mean, in a bizarre way, I don't know why I'm talking about the war, other than, it leads to Saving Private Ryan, which I think was for me a very special film. It was a very personal film.
Hmm.
Um, because, Dad was landed on the British beach, Sword, on D-Day, and went through France onto Belgium and then onto Holland. Um, to liberate Holland. But he was attached, funnily enough, another American attachment. He was attached to the American tanks as an engineer.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So,
So, but yes, I think for Saving Private Ryan, that's the film that was closest to my family because I was sort of brought up with the idea of that the war happened, 2 minutes before I was born, rather than a significant, more than a decade. Um,
mhm.
because it affected our lives so much.
So much. Hmm.
Yeah. So it was, and Dad, was obviously still alive, and he didn't want to come and visit the set, which was very unusual of him. And he didn't want to come to Ireland. He didn't want to, see anything like that. But he did impart something, which I then relayed to Tom Hanks and the boys on that film, which was that when the tailgate comes down, when that, landing craft
Yes.
hits the shore and the tailgate comes down, that's the frightening time because there's nothing stopping the bullets
Oh,
anymore. And all you do is you follow orders because you can't think, you can't do anything other than what you're told to do. So that was sort of interesting. And he did visit the set, but at the Rommel part when it was the flyby and the fighting was over. Yeah,
very interesting. So
yeah,
really, you were made to do that film through your father. I mean, I'm sure there was so much recall, in the back of your mind, as you said, the war was 2 minutes before you were born. The scars of men in England. I know even when I first went there to live in 1977, you could still see it on the streets in some of the injured and in the men who were still alive, and the stories of the rationing. I mean, all of these things were so profound for every person in the UK.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And when I was growing up, in the 60s, when that there were still bomb sites.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't uncommon to see the bomb sites around London. So yeah, I think it was something that was very close, and it meant so much. The wonderful thing about that film was when it was screened, the veterans who saw the film actually resonated with it, and
Really.
yeah, and were so grateful that it was a depiction of what it was like on the D-Day landing, rather than, and I don't mean disparaging to anyone else's work, but rather than that kind of Audie Murphy version.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I
So
understand.
I think it was a really wonderful opportunity to work on that film, but it was really hard. It was incredibly hard.
So let's go with that right then, because I have so many questions actually about Saving Private Ryan, and really with regard to the makeup. I mean, I already still have a frisson from what we're talking about from just PTSD, because it's really difficult for me to watch war films and Holocaust films. And I swear, I always tell my husband, I think in another life I was in the war, and I was one of those soldiers ready to get off, on the beach and filled with fear. When I watch these films, I I'll never forget Tom Hanks's performance in this movie, right down to his hands shaking all the time, not being able to hold the cigarette. But what I
Yeah.
think about with regards to the makeup is, how do you keep this refreshed? The filth, the hair, the mud, the wigs. How do you do it?
Well, the biggest challenge, actually, let's go back to the beginning on the drawing board, is that the whole point of uniform is to make people look uniform. So to distinguish one character or the principal actors from the surrounding soldiers is always tricky, especially when they're all in helmets, they're all in the same uniform. So what we did was everyone had their own kind of unique pattern of dirt. And where you could, obviously, with Mellish, she had a moustache, so that was an addition. But uh, with some of the others, it would be, small details or keeping the shape of the dirt separate and different from each other, so you could identify them easily, rather than wondering who the hell's that. There's always a problem in war films. Um, but to maintain it, some of the things, when they were in the sea, it was tricky. So we had dry suits on and floats that we could put the makeup on in a plastic bag. So we had lots of plastic bags and lots of running in and out of the sea at Wexford in Ireland. Um, and it was tough. I mean, filming on beaches is always tough. Walking on sand is always tough, let alone with all your equipment. You've got the peddlers with a gallon of blood in, you have boxes of prosthetics, you've got all those things, and people think of makeup being quite light. Actually, it's incredibly heavy most of the time. And you're
Absolutely.
wearing a load of bags. And there were 97 steps, which I'll never forget, from where the makeup trailer was on the cliff top down to the beach, and then a quarter of a mile walk to the set with all your equipment. So, that was challenging. And Stephen was filming at a really fast pace. So you had to be on your mettle. I mean, at one point we had 11 cameras on the beach. So I had a makeup artist with every camera, because what that camera was going to be shooting, so they had to dash out and either do touch up or add blood or injuries or, anything that was demanded in the action for that shot. So it was challenging, but all of that I seem to recall, and it is a recollection. I don't know if it's an absolute fact. I might be a day or two off, but basically from the whole landing, that whole Normandy landing, up until them achieving the cliff top, we did that in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So it was going some. I mean, it really was.
Incredible. How many
Mm.
did you have in your crew?
There were 5 of us on main team. And then we had additionals that would come to help.
Wow.
But we had the crowd, there was 1,000 crowd background, 1,000 crowd soldiers, Irish Army. And we had 28 principals. And I think it was somewhere in the region of either 48 or 50 stunts.
Good Lord. Amazing.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. When you are first offered a project, do you like to sit with the story and do you storyboard yourself? And do you have immediate hits in your mind about the direction you want to go, or do you just start working with the director immediately?
No, well, it depends on who the director is and what the story is. And
Mhm.
so that shifts and changes slightly. But basically, for my method is that I read the script and then I reread it, having read it once so that I know what the story is. Then I reread it and start to think about the details within the script of the characters. Then I read it again and start my makeup version of my own makeup script. So
Okay.
for example, you have a character and they say time passes. Well, how much time? Is it enough time to grow a beard? Is it enough time
Right.
for hair to grow? I mean, what does that look like? Um, is this the middle of the night? Are they tired? Have they gone to bed? Have they got a cold? Is it cold out? Is it hot? Are they sweating? Are they worried? What's the time difference? Have they aged? How are they feeling? Are they well? All those
Hmm.
questions you ask yourself, and then set within the storyline of, if it's period, then, you know, is this a hygienically clean period, or are they a chimney sweep, or are they,
Yeah.
it's all those layers. So you get the patina and you work with the patina on the script. And then I go and have a conversation with the director, but I might pull some images from either research. It could be a painting, it can be something on the internet, it
Oh.
can be personal photographs, it can be any of those things. For example, when we did Warhorse, I asked everyone, because the Great War, the 1418 War, was something that affected most families in the UK.
Hmm.
So I would ask everyone on the team to get their either grandfather or great grandfather, depending on if there were any family photographs of that time. And it does two things. It engages people with the story rather than it just being turn up for work. It
Hmm.
also engages you because it's you have the opportunity of recreating, which is exactly what happened to the wig maker who was making the moustaches, Sarah Weatherburn. She actually got to recreate her grandfather's moustache on one of the actors. that's how she modeled that particular moustache. So, and that was tremendous. And there was one actor, Pip, who looked exactly like his grandfather, so much so that his grandfather had died during the Great War, and his mother was pregnant with Pip's father. So he'd never met him. He'd only ever seen
Oh
photographs of
my
his
gosh.
grandfather. And then Pip was playing a colonel, and we made the grandfather's moustache. So his dad, who was in his 90s, when he actually saw Pip, his son, look like his father, the father he'd never met. It was very moving. And
Oh,
and that's a wonderful opportunity to do something like that.
how deeply personal.
Yeah.
How deeply personal. And I believe that also in Warhorse, you were dealing with a whole equine arena. You were you
Yes,
were you were
there
taking
was
care
a
of
makeup.
horses.
Yeah. There was an equine makeup department, which I don't know if it was a first, but it was definitely a first for me. Um, and because we had 16 Joeys and 6 top thorns, and of course, horses, like people, don't look like each other. You know, they
Right.
are individuals, and obviously, Joey was meant to have a white blaze and 4 white socks, and you're dealing with horses that are trained to a level where they have maybe one skill, and a horse can only work for 2 hours maximum, before they have to rest. I mean, and which is fair enough. So we you had multiple horses that had to come in because the working day is the working day.
Right.
And making one horse look like another is quite tricky. But you use the same as you would with a person, the eye to mouth ratio. And what we did was we shaved out the blaze and had little wiglets made in different kind of dimensions to either widen or lengthen, elongate the face, or bring the eyes closer together as a cheat, because you're never seeing them in comparison to each other. You're only seeing them one at a time. So
Exactly.
yeah, so that's what we did, and all the top thorns had to be black. So if you had a horse, for example, who was a bay but really had great talent at lying down, which there was, who was this wonderful horse called George, who was so relaxed. And I don't want to spoil it for anyone if you haven't seen the film, but there's a reason why the horse has to lie down for a significant amount of time. Um, and George was just perfect at that. And then you got wonderful moments. I remember Swaino, who was one of the Joeys, was there as George was lying down and actually got concerned because George was so relaxed, and he wasn't drugged or anything. I mean,
Yeah.
he was just a bomb-proof horse who liked to lie down. So, you know, Swaino came over and was putting his muzzle on top of George's. And of course, it's in the film because it was just wonderful. And
Oh,
all of us, we were all crying because it was so beautiful to see. I mean, I will spoil the story actually because it's a dying scene. So you're upset anyway because Top Thorn's dying.
right.
And
Right.
then you get this horse who's standing there suddenly coming over and showing concern. And we were awash.
Oh
All
my
of us.
gosh. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
those moments. And they always seem to happen for Steven Spielberg in his films. It's
Yes.
like the
Well, it's
skies open up in the perfect sunset for that man.
exactly. Um, I think it's what he brings. I mean, he brings a magic
Oh,
to
there's no
the set.
question. And speaking
Yeah.
to that, I watched the most fascinating interview with you and Giannis and Steve Carter, Rick Carter, and
But
Michael Kahn, where you were addressing making Warhorse when you just come off of Lincoln. And there was such a beauty, there was an aura between all of you that really spoke to the camaraderie that went into that film, and all on behalf of Steven Spielberg.
yes, that's what Stephen brings out from you, and it's also how he relates to you. Um, he's he's absolutely 100%
Yeah,
committed
he
to the
is.
storytelling process. And what I really love, the moments I love the best, are when everything comes together and his enthusiasm knows no bounds. And it's as if he's 9 years old. And it's yes. And it's absolutely full of every moment of joy and thrill as if it's his first day on his first film.
Film, yeah.
There's nothing jaded or, we're doing this again about him,
But at the
which
same
is
time,
wonderful.
he's the most magic storyteller of all, perhaps. But at the same time, he expects everyone to do their job. And he has an expectation of all of you to be there and prepared, doesn't he?
Oh yes, oh yeah. He's a hard taskmaster, and and you go to him with an idea, and you might think it's a real killer of an idea. How fantastic is this? And you think, oh, I'm going to get a brownie point. And no, what happens is you end up having this conversation, and rather like that game where you put one hand on top of another and it goes up and up and up, that's
Mhm.
what he does. So he'll take an idea and go, yeah, but can you do this? Oh, hmm, leave it with
Interesting.
me, and you go off. So when you come back at the end of the film, working with Stephen, you're a better makeup artist than you were on day one.
Right.
And I've never known that not be the case. And you're more ready to make that film on the last day than you ever were on the first day.
Quite. Exactly. I
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah,
But that's the magic of Spielberg. I remember at the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival when he presented Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he told a wonderful story about sitting with his father on a night sky watching a meteor shower. And that is when he fell in love with the stars in the sky. You know, he brings that element to everything, whether it's the War of the Worlds, Indiana Jones, I mean, of course, E.T., Close Encounters. We all want that emotional journey with him. We want to go on that emotional journey. And that's what's so perfect about Amblin Entertainment, isn't it? You know, I mean, it's him. It's just him.
yes,
Very
that's
interesting.
absolutely right. And I mean, he appreciates the work. He might not at the time, because it's all about what's going on in that shot, and it's the performance. So you have to be able to duck and dive. And
Okay.
yeah, you have to. I mean, one time I remember, one of his favorite things is to say, "Hair and makeup, get out." I don't know why it is, and it's whether we're there or not. We might not be in front of the camera. And one time I remember that there was a fireman putting out a fire, from one of the explosions on Saving Private Ryan. So there he is, in a fireman's uniform, that not look with a hose. And Stephen's saying, hair makeup, get out. So when the fireman, I mean, I have to laugh. So when the fireman came out, I gave him a puff and said, I think you'll join in my department.
I love it. I absolutely love it. What was the last film you worked with him on?
Well, what was the last film? I think it would be Ready Player One. I
Yeah.
was going to do The Fabelmans, and it was a very difficult time. So I wasn't able to do that, which was a great disappointment, actually. Um, and because it was, Stephen's story,
Mm-hmm. Of
and I would love to have
course.
been able to work with him on that, but it wasn't the right time. It was still COVID-y and all those things, so
I
it
know.
wasn't possible.
COVID
Um,
COVID has altered things, yes.
yeah.
But there will be
Mhm.
another. There will be another project,
Oh, I
Lois
hope
Burwell.
so.
I am sure. I am sure. Now I want to speak to you about the process of Braveheart.
Right.
I from everything I have watched online, from there's a beautiful piece that everyone out there can watch, and I do urge everyone to seek this out. Behind the Oscar speech, where you speak about that moment when you heard your name called, and of course looking at Mel Gibson, who had tears in his eyes, and you It's so beautiful. It's such an intimate moment. And with everything else you're saying today in this interview, I'm getting to know you as that kind of woman, which is really rare and wonderful. But what was the Oscar experience like for you, actually, after all that work?
Well, it was mixed. I think most of those type of things are mixed, actually. They're not fully joyous, they're not fully splendid, and they're obviously meant to be. It's rather like, I tell you what I can describe it as being, and obviously that's down to everyone's own personal experience if they've ever been married. But it's rather like getting married, which is joyous and wonderful. And at the same time, you're worried about Auntie Betty sitting by, and there's going to be a family argument at some point. You know what I mean? It's that thing, and somehow in the process, it stops being about you and starts to be about everything else. I
Wow.
think that was my experience. It might
Yeah.
not be everyone's experience, but it was definitely mine. And I tell you for why, because I was shooting on The Fifth Element in England at Pinewood, and so I wasn't free to enjoy all the build-up of it. Um, I was still engaged on the Fifth Element,
Of course,
getting
you were in
ready
your
for
zone.
Floston. So yes, doing all those things. And before the car came to pick me up on the, and there was a question about even being able to attend, and I didn't get to the nominees luncheon and, none of those kind of fun build-up things. It was just sort of out there. And there was a little bit of acrimony and jealousy that came in as well.
Mm,
Um, which can taint the water, can taint the well
right.
if you allow it to. Um, so there was that. And so the car came to pick me up to take me to LA because I could only be there for the weekend. And I was still putting false eyelashes on the air stewardesses for Floston. So it was just sort of, all right, okay, here's the bag, the roll-on bag, get on the plane, get off the other, get off here, got the time difference, all of that. You're going to, I met with Mel, which was great. And we managed to have a bite to eat. And obviously, John was nominated as well, my husband, because we met on Braveheart. So it was a very special film and being excited for him as well as myself. And the day of the ceremony, I mean, I know most people will go to, you know, hair and makeup and have all that done for them
Of
to go.
course.
Well, of course, I didn't have time for that. And so it was just kind of, do something and go. And it was kind of nerve-wracking and everything. And my real fear was that if they would, and I congratulated everyone in our category. Um, and John was sitting on the far side of the theatre with his category, cinematographer. So we weren't sitting together.
Ah, okay.
So there was a chum of mine that I'd known for years and years and years who was English, who'd come out to LA to live. So she was my plus one. Um, so that was fun. And we've known each other since we were in our teens. Um, so we were sitting there, and I was on the end of the aisle. And there's this sort of thing that if you're at the end, you stand at, it's because they put you there because it's a better chance of they think you're going to win or whatever. I mean, that's absolute nonsense. And I know that because recently I was a governor and one of the things I did was as an officer of the academy was the awards committee. So everything award related I would be involved with. So I know it's absolutely a nonsense about sitting at the end means that names on the ticket.
Right.
Anyway, so they called our names, and my fear was that I wouldn't be able to stand up, that I'd just be rooted to the spot, like you are in dreams sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So of course they called my name, and I was like a greyhound out of the dog races following that rabbit. I went so fast to the steps to climb up to the stage that I looked behind me, and Peter and Paul were sitting there going for the camera. For the cameras. I was standing there on my own. So I ran back to collect them. And we all went up together. And I said the most stupid thing to the lovely young actress who was presenting it. And I said to her, thank you for saying my name so nicely. Where'd that come from? What was that? You know. And of course, the other really ridiculous thing was that I've been on stage before, and as you know, when you get the footlights and everything, you just see a kind of like a shape, unless you're in
Right.
theatre in the round. You just see a shape of a head in the audience, don't you? They're more or less lost in the blackness
Hmm.
because you're illuminated. Well, of course, how stupid am I? It's lit for television, so you can see every face. So you're standing on this stage in front of your peers, seeing every face.
That's right.
So it was just, and I hadn't expected that. So I was very grateful that Peter, spoke because was a good spokesman. I mean, he was always keen to be the one to speak, and thank God for it, because I wouldn't have made sense, I think, or I'd just have said thank you, because I think that's actually all you have to say, unless you're moved in the moment.
And we are
But
speaking about Peter Frampton and Paul Pattinson, who you shared
yes,
this with. Right.
that's right.
Okay.
Um, and the wonderful thing was that, I was standing there and I saw Mel, and Mel had tears in his eyes, and I don't know why, but it settled me because it was our experience. It
Right.
was our work that brought this about. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
It's not
Uniquely shared.
just
Hmm.
yes, it's
Hmm.
it's a collaboration. It's a shared experience because no one can shine on their own. You all have to work as hard as each other to make a film. And a really successful film is reliant on everyone, including, I think I always compare it to being an orchestra, actually, because that everyone understands that, which is not, you can't always be the lead violinist. Sometimes you're the bloke at the back with the triangle
That's
who's
right.
only going to be useful at one particular moment. But at that one particular moment, that's what you need.
It means everything.
And
And
it's everything.
and
And
didn't
without that, it doesn't work. So that's how I view filmmaking.
wow.
Oh, well, I'll tell you a funny story, actually. It's quite a personal one, but I hope it makes your listeners laugh. Um, so we've got the statuette, the gold bald man, and it's very heavy, weighs about 6 pounds.
Hmm.
It's not lightweight at all. And of course, as nature is, and nerves and all those things, I want to spend a penny. So we're following this track, and you go through, one room of press, then another room of press, and so on and so forth, before you go back to your seat with the gold ball man. But you see, obviously, the gold ball man doesn't have your name on it.
Right.
So it's could be anybody's. So they point out where there's a bathroom. So I popped to the bathroom. Now, the stall doors are quite high and the cistern sloped. So there wasn't anywhere to put Oscar.
Oh no.
So you're not going to put it on the floor because someone could reach underneath, possibly, or it doesn't feel right to put it on, a loo floor,
Correct. Correct.
or you couldn't balance it on the system because it was too heavy and it started to slide. And I needed to pee. So I'm trying to, I had trousers on actually, satin trousers and a velvet top. Um, so I'm trying to get ready to have a pee, balancing Oscar under my chin and in my shirt, turning my shirt into kind of like a bag shape and balancing this thing. And I thought, the glamour of it all,
Exactly. This is one of those moments that no one would believe.
Yeah, no, exactly.
After you had literally just thrown your stuff in the bag and got on the plane and get in the car, and there you are. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
no pomp and
But
circumstance.
the other thing was that when I came back, because I had to come back to Floston, we were shooting Floston with 300 extras,
Oh, wow.
all of which had John Paul Gaultier costumes, and we'd gone through fittings. So there
Right.
were specific looks of groups, as well as all the principals. As I was coming back through, obviously they scanned the bag because you can't. What you're going to do, you're going to have it in. I was going to have it in my carry-on because I only went with the carry-on because I was only there for the weekend. So of course they scanned it. There's this whole thing leaving the US about what you have in your bag. Can you open your bag? So of course, open the bag, and there's, Oscar in it. I'm not going to walk through holding it, so it's in the carry-on bag. So there was this whole big brouhaha about having this and everything. All congratulations. So of course on the plane they started to make much of me. I mean, it was really very sweet, but somehow mortifying.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally flew back in and went straight to the set to get 300 crowd ready. And
My
there was
gosh.
Oscar, in the bag.
I would have had Oscar out sitting on that seat next to me proudly, waiting for photos.
No, I think I
Oh my gosh.
probably would now, but I didn't at the time. I think you have to be, there's something about getting older that makes you bolder
Yeah.
because you realize that
Yeah.
I don't know about you, and I suppose it's a personal reveal, and I'm not trying to body shame anyone at all, but I know that now I think back and I would never wear a bikini, for example. Bikinis weren't me because I didn't think that my shape or form was good enough to wear a bikini. Now I look back and I think, you idiot, why didn't you do that? You know, now I wouldn't wear a bikini, but I've got good reason. Then it was like, you're crazy. And life's a bit like that. I think there's something that happens to women as they get older, or when I say older, that sounds so rude. I don't mean it in that way, but as we mature, and probably there's something about menopause that does it too, where you can be emboldened in a
That's right.
way that you would never have been in your 20s, or for me in my 30s.
But don't you think it's also through the work you've done and what you've built? I mean, you're a creator. And I think as we get older as creators, we learn that we have a new power where we can be reckless. We can be more reckless. We can change our perspective all the time. It kind of enables us to be freer. That's how I view it.
I agree. I agree completely. And I think it also, you're less what, in a weird way, the more a body of work you have,
Mm-hmm.
so the more credits you have and the more success you have, the more you have to lose. And at the same time, you care less about the thought of losing. So
Exactly.
you're emboldened.
Exactly.
But those two things exist exactly at the same time. At least they do for me. And I suspect they do for you. and in a weird way, there's a willingness. I mean, now I talk when I'm with a department, and I have a team working with me, and the team is really important to me. That one of the things I say is, don't worry about it. You've made a mistake. No, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That fails, because through that failure, that's actually a really important part of being creative,
Totally.
the ability to fail. Because if you aren't able to fail, you're not able to succeed because you're not taking risks. And everything, everything that's creative is a risk, and you have to make yourself vulnerable.
So well said, Lois Burwell. That was actually one of my questions today. How many times have you faltered or had a failure? And how many times has it taught you, especially in the world of makeup? I mean, we're talking about a normal film, and then we're talking about films like The Fifth Element, strong with prosthetics. My gosh, if you're not taking risks, I don't think there's going to be a real hit of a movie, you know?
That's right. No, yeah, and oh, I've had numerous failures. I mean, really. And you should never be too worried about. I mean, obviously, if it's fail, 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 then you will be fired. But if it's, I don't think this is working, take it off, start again,
Yeah,
and say to the actor, no, this isn't it. It's not working. Can you bear with me? Can you
yeah,
bear with me and let me try X?
yeah.
And either it's a yes or a no. But 9 times out of 10, they'll go with that because they too know that this isn't working and they want something that works.
And they're
So
seeing the process unfold and that
mm,
synergy, which is so exciting, which is what makes you great companions as well.
yeah.
I want to ask you something specifically about Braveheart. I'm just going to gather that you and Mel Gibson really connected. Am I right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we well, I say on my part, I think he'd say on his part too. I don't
Mhm.
like speaking for someone else and being presumptive, but yes, I mean I first worked with Mel on Air America,
Right.
and then we did Hamlet, and we get on very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's he's a wonderful director to work with. He's very hail fellow, well met.
Uh-huh.
That he's not a hierarchical person at all.
Okay.
So, for example, on Braveheart, every day, if he wasn't editing, or he wasn't doing something that he had to do, taking a meeting, bearing in mind he was producing, directing, and starring in that film. So if he wasn't doing something that was absolutely work related, for example, I've never known him just expect someone else to get his lunch. He will always
Right.
queue up and get his own
I
lunch
can imagine
from
that
the
out of him.
caterers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he would go and sit with every department on that film to see how the film was going for them during
Impressive.
lunch. So
Impressive.
yeah, he's very good. And one day, for example, he lost his temper. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on everyone on a film set. It looks like you hurry up and wait, and you're standing around waiting for something to happen. But actually, you never really relax. It's always a high tension because time is money. And it's a force to come up with something in that moment, in that second, and get on with it.
Yeah.
And so it was in one of the battles, and Mel lost his temper and he shouted at one of the ADs who was dressed as one of the crowd. And then he realized that it was a mistake. So, unlike most people who would lose their temper and get away with it because of their position publicly, he actually apologized publicly as well.
Wow.
And that says a lot.
That says a lot, definitely, about his integrity and his journeyman attitude to being, one of the essential players, not just the director and the lead actor. You know, the look that you developed, the colors of Scotland, the blue and the white paint.
Yeah,
I heard, I don't know if this is just a rumor, but I heard that Mel's original idea was to have the St. Andrew's cross,
that's
and it
right.
was your idea to have this very distinctive look in the blue and the white stripes. Um, that is something that's so easily recognizable. Was this just a gut reaction of yours? Were you strong about that idea?
I was strong about that idea, and we went through a whole slew of Polaroids. It was in the days of Polaroids. Um, so on a Saturday, made the woad, and the woad came from a formula that I'd done on a film called The Draftsman's Contract, which was a body
Yeah.
makeup. But we changed it up slightly. Peter Frampton was very clever with that. But we used clay and pigment. So the actual woad um, war paint was dark blue, and then it dried because of the clay content to the light blue that it
Okay.
was. So you have to picture that it was navy blue when it went on, and then dried with a hairdryer, it became that. Anyway, it flashed off and dried. So we started off with the St. Andrew's cross because that's what Mel wanted. He said, I want something simple. And I kept saying, it would be, I really want you to have a window that you are looking through
Mm,
because that's what the leader is doing for Scotland. You are looking through to the future through a narrowness. That's what I see it as being. And he didn't want that purely because he'd made the film Man Man Without a Face, I think it was called.
of
I can't
course.
remember what it
Yeah.
was called.
Yes.
And had a burn all the way down. And he said, people will think it's just that rehashed. No, no, they won't. Yes, they will. No, no, they won't. Let's try it. So we tried everything else in between. There was a hand over his face, a woad in the shape of a hand. There were the cross stripes that we actually used later in the film.
hmm hmm
I called them his go faster stripes. So we had the go faster stripes. We had the Celtic cross. In fact, if you look at the makeups on the other members of the Wallace clan, the other actors,
Yes.
all those looks were all the things we tried. So, you know, uh,
Very
and
interesting.
then at the very last innings, we he said, "Oh, okay then." So I did the half face, and then wanted this side to follow the contours of his face. That's how that's divided. So it's just straight and then contours. So it's an interesting, I hope an interesting, thing to look through. And although he didn't want it, when we got to that, having gone round the houses and tried everything else, he went, yeah, that's what we're going to do then.
You're right. You were right
So,
all the time.
and that was the pair of us working towards it
Mhm,
together.
together. I love it. I love it. You
Yeah.
developed a phenomenon, Lois Burwell, in that you did. For
But I
every
tell you what
soccer
was
fan.
really exciting. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump over you. I tell you what was really exciting about that. That when I saw football fans, I
hmm
saw that football fans were painting their faces like that, and people were doing it and going to fancy dress parties. And I just thought, well, that's something really wonderful. I mean, they'll never know who did it. They'll never know where that idea came from or how we worked towards it or what it was made from. But how brilliant that it can go into the public zeitgeist. How wonderful. And
Without question.
it's great. That's really a good thing. Um,
Without
and
question.
and that film, really, really galvanized the Scots. And there was the how it resonated with the heart of Scotland was something that, you know, was fabulous. Absolutely a wonderful gift. And I'm really pleased that that happened because it could so easily have gone the other way.
That's
But
right.
it was just at the right time. It came out at the right time. It captured the feeling. And it's a really thumping good story. I mean, it's not historically accurate, but it's a thumping good story.
Well, he went big and it worked. It
Yeah.
really worked for you both.
And the thing was that Mel paid for the last 2 weeks of that film out of his pocket because it had gone out over budget. I mean, I'm sure I shouldn't have revealed that, or maybe now it's so many years, nobody
It's
cares.
probably common
But
knowledge. Yeah.
but it's an interesting thing to tell you how committed he was to making that film, making the film he wanted it to be.
Hmm.
So he actually stumped up the money himself. And one of the images, which I really like actually, more than even um, the woad that everyone thinks of, is when he's got the completely blue face for the nightmare scene, when he's on the horse, riding the horse forward, and there's just blood across it.
Yes,
And it's very dramatic.
that's the
And
very
I
powerful.
painted the blue on his face, and he picked up the blood and went on it. So it was a real collaboration.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Talk about being in the groove again. You guys were on a roll.
yeah.
Are you still in contact with Mel Gibson?
Yes, occasionally, kind of Christmas cards.
Mhm.
Although we did speak a couple of months ago. But it can be, 2 years and we don't speak or be in the same room. But
Mhm.
it's always the same when we are. And he's very fond of John too, and yeah, it's good. And it doesn't
That's
actually,
interesting.
I don't think I know it sounds bizarre, but it doesn't matter if you work with someone again or not. Because if they want to explore and find new people and not
Mhm.
be in that comfort zone, they want to push themselves, then that's fair enough. You
Exactly.
have to give that to someone else as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Many times when I interview professional musicians, we talk about the performance. And I like to ask them the question, what do they enjoy most? Is it that moment of inspiration when they decide on a new program and they start to look at the music and really discover it? Or is it actually the performance itself? Now, I know I'm talking about two completely different things, which both have their own merit. But for you, what do you like to sit in the most?
Well, there are two things. I can't just choose one.
Mm.
Um, Two things. Being asked to do a film,
Hmm.
just being asked is always wonderful because someone wanting you
Yeah.
and thinking you're good is absolutely a wonderful experience. But then what I really like, I tell you, the most magical moments I've experienced have always been on the same theme, which is actually doing the work is can be bloody hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the cast and the time and the pressure of it all. I mean, it can be, it's not that moment. The moment of joy, we, I'm going to just mention Lincoln. So when we were, because this is really a very strong memory with me. I
Yes.
mean, it was a really exceptionally difficult film to do. And you had all that facial hair, all those wigs. It was, and Kay George is a wonderful hairstylist. And we had a wonderful facial hair maker called Terry Jarvis. So very blessed with the team. It was a tip-top team. But it didn't mean that the work's any easier. And we had in the House of Representatives, Mr. Lincoln wasn't shooting that day. So we still had 58 cast and 260 background. And on the floor of what was meant to be, you know, the House of Representatives, but we were in Virginia, we had principals and background actors all sitting in a row, intermixed and intermingled. So everyone had to be of the same standard because otherwise you'll bounce out of the story. They wouldn't do a pre-call of for the background longer than 2 hours, where really we needed 3 to 3.5. So we had to get all that cast ready. We had 25 people working on the background and some of the principals. We had a core five who did the principals, including myself. So we were knocking people out, and that's hard
Wow.
with facial hair, let alone wigs as well, which a lot of them had. I would say it must have been at least 65 to about 65% had something added, either a wig or a beard or a moustache, or even if they'd grown their own, you had to dress it and all of that. Anyway, this is a long preamble and I hope you edit it. But anyway, so I walked to the set and I was exhausted and it had, quite a lot of bickering with production about the times and what the work was and all those things.
Okay.
And as you often do, it's not really horrible. It's just part of the job. And so I walked onto the set, walked into the House of Representatives, not with my head in a good place, thinking, we've got to do the same thing tomorrow. Oh my God. So I walked in and one of the actors was rehearsing a speech, and it was the Lincoln Afrikaner speech. So Lee Pace was gesticulating. He was a very handsome man anyway, and he was waving his arms and walking up and down, and everyone was in the rehearsal, and the extras were all going. And it looked so real. They all looked so wonderful. I started to cry because I'd been distracted for a moment by the tussle with production, which, is nothing. In the end, what you're doing it for is that moment.
That moment, that's right.
That is exceptionally rewarding. And it's what I call the quiet yes. If you ever in your lifetime experience the quiet yes with your work, then how fortunate are you? And the quiet yes is, you're as close to how you want it to be as you can manage, given the limitations of it, but you're close to no strings, it being yes moment. And no one can give that to you and no one can take it away. There can be representations of it with awards or not.
Yeah.
But actually, that quiet yes is the most special of all.
See, that's that point in the interview I'm talking about that's so special. The quiet yes. I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life, Lois. That is really beautiful. And because there was so much going on in every scene in Lincoln, I mean, really. And the whole chiaroscuro, and again, the mud and the filth and the realism. And here you are developing a prosthetic for Daniel Day-Lewis to really represent this man. And it was successful.
It was successful, actually. And I remember because there's many stories about working with Daniel Day. And he's a wonderful actor. And he has a process of getting into the character. And it's not really method. I mean, it really isn't. It's his own process, which you could kind of, gets described as being a method form, and he inhabits the character, but it isn't fully like that. Anyway, he initially didn't really want to wear makeup and had thought that performance, or it be minimal. And he thought that performance could pull it through. And Stephen really wanted him to look like Lincoln because that's what everyone expected.
Right.
And Daniel's concern was that the process of the artifice would somehow take him out from inhabiting being Lincoln. I mean, I think that's what it was. I mean, it wasn't expressed in that way to me,
Correct.
but but that's really what it was. So we had to find a way of, which you do with all makeup, to be perfectly honest, any character makeup on an actor, you have to find the place where they can perform and you can do your job.
Yes.
So it's a marrying and a negotiation of creativity. That's what it is. And that's what we found. And when I say we, Kenny Myers was my second on that film, and we made up Lincoln together. We made up DDL together because we only had an hour and 15 minutes to do everything. I mean, absolutely everything,
Oh my
including
gosh.
hair. Because he couldn't sit in the chair and then go out and give a performance. I mean, that
Right.
was his. So we had to double team. And it's a double team process anyway. One of the things that we were doing, which is rather than the prosthetic, because the only prosthetic he wore was the mole. Um, so the actual skin changing and feature changing was really heavily reliant on a process called stretch and stipple, where you need four hands basically to do it because you are stretching on pulls that then create wrinkles, shapes, and forms. And we did different layers in different areas on the face. And he did have ear pushes as well. Um,
That's a
which
lot.
actually by the end of the day make your ears ache. I mean that was something we had to take the pressure off, but we did the best we possibly could. Um, and so most of it is kind of underpainting, creating these shapes every day anew. It wasn't as if you pull it out of mold. You had to do it and form it with your hands at lightning speed and then color over the top and then maintain that during the day. So it was challenging for everyone. And plus the
Everyone.
fact that I'm English and so's Daniel.
Hmm.
And there was, which I prefer anyway, as I said to you, I can't talk when, I know I'm gabbling away now, but I can't actually talk when I'm working
Correct.
very well. Um, so it suited me because he didn't want to hear me speak because I'm English. And so is he. And he was worried about, well, not worried, but concerned that it would bounce him out somehow. So we did the makeup in silence. And therefore, Kenny became the person who could speak. And I think I took it literally. And Daniel wasn't expecting me to take it really that far. But then, of course, one of the great teases on the set, because Stephen does have a quite a sharp sense of humor. I mean, he's a fun person, he's got a very
Hmm.
good sense of humor. But of course, both he and Adam Sumner, the first AD, found it endlessly amusing to ask me a question standing right by the side of Mr. Lincoln that I was meant to answer and of course couldn't. So then they came up with that silly questions to ask,
Oh my gosh. Oh my
knowing I couldn't respond. Anyway, so we you can have levity on a film set, and that's part of the fun of it.
And I
But
think
yeah,
it would be much needed on something like Lincoln. I mean, it is such a powerful. It's a film of gravitas.
oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we did have giggles sometimes. I mean, things just happen. For example, I told you that, you're doing the stretch and stuff. So my hands were there and you couldn't move. And at this point, poor Daniel had a bad back. He'd done something to
oh,
his back. So
okay.
he couldn't sit in the chair for long. So he was standing up and he is like 6'4". I mean,
Oh,
he's, Lincoln height. And of course, you don't know how tall I am, but I'm a shortstop. I'm kind of 5'2". And Kenny's not much bigger either, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, so he was leaning on the back of the makeup chair and we were balanced on apple boxes doing this makeup.
no.
So to
Oh,
reach his face and then to do the holds while you had to use the hairdryer and dry it and then powder in between. And you can't let go. Whatever you do, you can't let go because
oh
then you've
my.
lost the stretch and you have to start all over again.
Oh my gosh. All of
So it's a kind of pressurized thing to do and very awkward on apple boxes. Anyway, so one day, and bearing in mind I couldn't speak. So one day, Kenny glued my thumb to Daniel's forehead. And of course, I couldn't say, "You've glued my thumb" to Daniel's forehead. So I'm gesticulating with my head, going, staring at my thumb as if, pay attention, get the release, because I couldn't move. So of course there was a kind of like a shuffle, and then it was like, oh, I've glued your thumb to the floor. And of course Daniel started to laugh. So because he got good sense, but he bounced out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then another time he really did laugh, and was the person who broke the silence. Was, as I said to you, you do the, and then you powder in between. So of course Kenny goes like this with the to knock off excess powder off the brush, and then goes over the area and then turns back to get more while I'm standing there like this. And he'd covered my glasses with the powder and the whole of my face. And I couldn't see. I couldn't see. I couldn't move. My hands are still there. I was just like a whiteout. And of course, Daniel looks in the mirror and sees the fact that I'm blind because I've got powder and just bursts out laughing. So, yeah, you start off to,
This
it's
thing of
fine.
not being able to speak is definitely crippling.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Lois, these stories, I love it. I love it. So that kind of plays into one of my questions, which is really the physicality of what you do. I mean, you're talking about balancing yourself on apple boxes, being blinded, you can't speak. How do you deal with that all day? I mean, these film hours are long. You're there from morning to night. How do you cope with the physicality of it?
Well, hopefully I keep myself as fit as I possibly can. I could be fitter actually at the moment, to be perfectly honest. And I don't know if I could do that now. I mean, that's the other thing, isn't
Yeah.
it? As time passes, you go, well, I could do that then. Nothing to say out and do it now. You hope you can. But over the course of my career, I've been hiding in cupboards, I've been under tables, as a camera comes round, if you're doing a blood rig, you just drop to the ground. I've had to fall into grasses in the middle of the night. One time I was hiding behind a bush on Air America in the jungle in Thailand on a night shoot. And of course, the lights bring out every flying object, every creepy crawly. I
Oh
mean,
God.
I actually had to walk 10 minutes to just sit in a van where there weren't things heaving and moving around me. Otherwise, I'd have screamed. I mean, that's how bad it was. Anyway, I was down behind this bush and there's a scorpion like 5 inches away from me. But you don't cry out because
Of
it's a
course.
take and you're not going to ruin a take. So you just sit with it and then go, hello, someone help me. I mean,
Protect me
actually,
from all the creepy crawlies. Yeah.
once on Lincoln, we were in the theatre scene. So there's, um, Sally and DDL, but it was actually it was a fake box. So there wasn't a gangway to get to either of them. And it was really very narrow with a drop down, you know, a real drop. It wasn't on the ground floor. It had been created on the side up high,
Mhm.
but there was no way for me to go around. So there was just this narrow edge, and I started to go around, and all of a sudden I felt a hand. I felt a hand go down. This is true. Go down the back of my trousers, and holding on to basically the back of my trousers and my knickers, and it was. And it was Daniel. It was Mr. Lincoln because he was so worried about me falling, which I could have done actually, falling off. It wasn't like I was tied to something. And of course, I'm concentrating, doing my hands like this. And I thought, whose hands down my trousers?
It's Daniel Day-Lewis.
Holding on in case I fell off. So, you have these kind of ridiculous things that happen. And I mean, I used to never sit. Actually, on 80 for Brady, I had a chair. I had a little tiny, very, very,
Mhm.
non-noticeable camp chair. I hate having a chair on set, to be perfectly honest. But on 80 for Brady, I did because I started to get tired.
Yeah.
And normally I stand. I'm one of the people that stand all the time.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
and I'm known for that, actually. Um, but these days I'll take a chair.
Yeah, I think so, Lois. I
Yeah,
think so.
yeah.
Lois, you must write a book, and I really hope there's one in the offing. Any chance of this in the future for us?
I don't think so. I don't think so because, I remember there was I can't remember whose biography it was actually, where there was, mention of conversations or whatever. I mean, I don't think anything I've said today anyone would be offended by. Do you know what I mean? And it's true, and it comes from a good place. But there was something that revealed about someone and I was working with the actor who was mentioned within this biography at the time, and he said, "I'm sitting on a film set with a fellow actor." That's what I'm doing. I'm being in real time. I didn't think that it was going to be then used as some kind of book later
Mm,
on. And it
mm.
affects how I interact with people. So, so no, I won't do a book. Not unless I outlive everyone else. Then I
Understood.
will.
Of course, we have to have these stories. They're so delightful. I mean, you've been so honest with me. I adore it. So, Lois Burwell, tell me what is the legacy that you want to leave behind in your work? What is the one thing you want to leave behind or be respected for the most?
Well, what I've always wanted, actually, to be perfectly honest, is to be known amongst my peers as the person who would always, get someone who was retired or going through a hard time, that I would be able to help my colleagues with a day's work, even if they might be past their sell-by date,
Oh,
purely because they've got a gas bill to pay or whatever, and find
yeah.
something. I mean, without ripping off the production, obviously. Um, and I would like to be known at the other end of the scale to be the person who can encourage and bring on new talent and
Hmm.
help them develop, which I do through the Gold program. And I've always had trainees on every film I've ever done, including union films, if I
Mhm.
can and get dispensation for them, because there's something awful about spending years and years knocking at a door, and when the doors open for you, you go in and go, "Oh, I don't like this."
Yeah.
So you give them the chance to actually see what it is first. Um, so that's, and to be fair, actually, I mean, I don't, that's what I would like my legacy to be, that they'd look back and think that I was a fair sort of person, yeah, to work with.
This sounds frightfully English to me. And after having lived in England for 20 years, that's a compliment to you. I think you bring a particular form of work ethic from your background to your work, and I appreciate that. And I've got to ask always my question on Center Stage with Pamela Kuhn, and that is there one word or phrase that really describes who you are, Lois Burwell, to the depth of your soul? What would it be?
Well, actually, I tell you what, I think it would be, and I'm not really a Monty Python fan. I hasten to add. I mean, I'm not a devotee of them, but it would be a scene because it's got to be a film reference. It has to be.
Okay.
So, it's a scene from the life of Brian, where there are all these people gathered, and the speaker is saying, "We're all individuals." And there's one bloke far at the back who goes, "I'm not."
I love it. this this is quite possibly the most surprising and out of left field, but this is great. That's fantastic. I've got to tell you, I am a lover of Monty Python, so I love it. You wound that in. That's fantastic, Lois. Wow. You dare. You actually take risks. You dare. You're a fantastic colleague. All of these wonderful stories. I could go on talking to you for, I don't know, all night. And I would love
Oh,
every moment of it. But I've got to leave you now and go host a soiree
I
to
know.
be
How
honest.
wonderful is that? I wish I could beam in.
I
Yeah.
think I think my pianist is lurking in the background, waiting to get to the piano.
Oh, bless. No, do.
You
Well,
know,
thank you for this.
when we met at TCM, it was a little bit of kismet, and I loved it that I sat down next to you and didn't realize who I was sitting next to. but yet I had yearned to have an interview with you. And I am so pleased that that serendipitous event has allowed us to do this. And I've got to thank you for your time because I know it's precious. And wow, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are the alchemist of movie magic, along with Steven Spielberg. And I know you're going to be humble to that, but you really are. So
Thank you.
wear it, baby, and
Ah,
enjoy.
bless you. Well, I hope we stay in touch. I want to listen to not just my podcast. I want to listen to your podcast.
You know, I'll tell you something. I just interviewed Chris Sarandon from The Princess Bride
Oh,
for the
I love
second
Chris.
time, and he and I have become quite friendly. And I just went to hear him do a live podcast the other night. He's doing a wonderful podcast on food and memories. And
Oh,
he's so good at it because you know he grew up in a family that had a restaurant. And what comes out from some of his interviews are really fascinating. You know, I'd invite you to check into that. It's called
oh,
Cooking by Heart with Chris Sarandon. And but I thought of you so many times when he and I were speaking. So, you know, you two have a connection there, of course.
absolutely. Oh, that's lovely.
But
Oh,
Lois,
as we
we
speak to
will
again, giving
connect.
my best. Yeah,
We will connect again, I promise you.
good.
And I hope everything goes well for you with all of your animals on your wonderful home, in your wonderful home, and your work goes ahead with a great panache and excitement. So
Thank you. And
until
and if you could send me the link to your podcast, that would be great because
I'll
then
be
I
happy
can
to do
listen
that.
to other episodes. I'm hoping
I'll be happy to do
that
that.
I'd love that.
All right.
Yeah.
And to all my listeners out there, I want you to know if you go online and put in Lois Burwell, you're going to come up with an entire canvas of opportunity to hear her speak, to watch her work, to see all the beauty of her craftsmanship in makeup and this world of magic in movies. So, Lois, thank you again for being on center stage. What an honor.
Oh, bless you. You take care of yourself.
And to everyone, please, I hope you'll go to center stage with PamelaKuhn.com for more shows like this. And as we walk our way into the magic of the arts and keep it spinning and the elements alive, we want to thank Lois Burwell for sharing her stories. So, to all my listeners, stay safe out there. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on center stage.